Ready to move on? Okay. Good of the cause. Have we received any emails or anybody joined us?
I actually did. Can you, whose speaker is on? Whose microphone is on?
Go ahead.
It says, good morning. I was wondering if anyone had a resolution to approve the winter sports that will be offered in the upcoming weeks. I'm not too sure if it should be vague or if others are putting in information pertaining to COVID. I will consult with our attorney after I get a feel for how detailed others are. Thanks, Jody. Jody Chantal. Did everybody else hear that?
Did everybody hear that?
It was a little unclear. What was it? Something about consulting an attorney with what other people are doing?
I'm unfamiliar with the name too. I don't know who that.
I think I misunderstood. I didn't really know what they were asking.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says, good morning. I was wondering if anyone had a resolution to approve the winter sports that will be offered in upcoming weeks. I'm not too sure if it should be vague or if others are putting in information pertaining to COVID. I will consult with our attorney after I get a feel for how detailed others are. Jody Chantel.
Quite sure how to interpret that.
Who is that?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the kind of context of, is it another school official or is it?
Is this coming from like an administration person from another district or?
How do you spell the name?
SHANTIL.
No.
Threatening legal action?
No, I don't think so.
SHAN.
NTAL.
Sure. We just keep on, there's no real response to that, and she'll get her answer as we belong here. I hope if she's listening or watching the live stream. Let's go on to reports to the board.
I know who Jody Chantal is.
Oh,
She is the
Yep.
secretary to the superintendent of Morrisonville.
Great. I was going to talk about two things. First, the state budget. I'll provide you with a bit of an overview, and then talk about things going on here in the school district. So starting with the state budget, you might remember that the last meeting, the executive budget had just been released, and so we were able to, the next day or two, take a look at it. Dana's been involved, been exploring that in depth, so he'll have more of a grasp of the details than I do. I just wanted to make sure that part of my superintendent's report, as we enter budget season, I know next week is our next budget workshop, that you're thinking about this. So statewide, the executive budget was proposed, and it provided numbers, for everybody as well as for us locally. And you can actually see that with some of the documents. I didn't provide this to you in board docs. These documents are widely available, and we'll provide you with this document next week. But you can see all the specific details of the state budget in this budget run. You might also remember that the executive proposal is just a proposal. It's not the budget itself. The budget itself has to be passed by the legislature. So when you see the executive proposal, you have to recognize that things are going to change. So first of all, the total amount proposed was $29 billion, or because some of the numbers were changed, some of the categories were new, $31.7 billion if you include the STAR category and federal category that were not in last year's budget. And so that represents a total of $2.1 billion increase over this year. But then again, as I said, some of the categories had changed. This does include the $4.3 billion of new federal funding that was included in the recently passed Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act. That was the federal law which provided additional support. And so that does include that, but it also then, while it gives some of that to schools, it also reduces from schools from other funds, right? We've talked about this, how the state budget has given with one hand and taken from the other. It's not 100% like it was for this year, but it is somewhat. $4.3 billion increase to statewide, and then a $607 million decrease, or what they call an offset. And so you're going to see these offsets when you look at our budget run as well, right? So they give us, the executive proposal gives us money with one hand, and then it takes away with another. For example, our offset in the governor's run was $270,495. This is after increases that were provided. So it can be confusing because there's money coming and going in different columns. So that's sort of that big picture. Another big item to recognize is that there's been proposed, again, a change in the way state finances are being distributed. This has to do with reimbursement funds. Now, you know that some of the money, foundation aid, is just a direct aid to schools, but some of it is based on how much we spend. So in the area of BOCES, in the area of textbooks, in the area of transportation and other areas, how much state aid we get depends on how much we spend. So we're reimbursed a portion of those expenditures. What the governor's proposing is to essentially eliminate the reimbursement process in those areas and come up with a block grant aid, and then keep that consistent into the future. So this is a way from their point of view, from the budget side, the state budget side, to have state aid for these areas be very predictable. From our point of view and other school districts' point of view, it throws a real wrench in the works, because this is not how these areas have been funded before. You've always been funded based on how much you spend. So if you spend more for BOCES, you're reimbursed a proportion of what you spent more, or less, right? So that's how it's worked. So this would be a significant shift. It's been attempted before and it did not pass. So we'll see how it goes this year. One of the items that we watch closely is pre-K. We have $405,000 that we are allocated, or at least up to $405,000 are allocated every year. That's in it again, and that was good news because that's our pre-K 4 budget right there. There are also a number of other areas. I won't go into all the details unless you have questions about ways that they reduce spending to try and balance this budget. So there's a number of different areas, including, I'll add in here, not for our public schools, but library aid. So public libraries are reduced in this budget proposal by 5%, and public broadcasting is reduced from 5%. So I guess the message is that if schools are going to get the kind of funding that we're asking for, it comes from another area. And sometimes those are areas that are important to us as well. So it's just good to know. Again, that's the governor's proposal. Now, in terms of Lake Placid, our budget, our foundation aid remains flat. So exactly what we were given for this year, and I think last year too. If Dana nods, shakes his head, you know that he's actually correcting me over there, right? And then there is a slight increase in building aid, but from our perspective, we don't think that that's the right amount. We think that they just have not yet seen, when they calculated these numbers, that the building aid did not recognize the completion of a project yet. So we do believe that the building aid number is going to go up. So you see an extra 60,000 or so in here for building. Actually, that's wrong. You see it. I can't get my finger on it right now. A certain amount of money for building aid, but we expect that to go up. What else? So then you see this something called a local district adjustment. I love these terms, but the local district adjustment is essentially a cut of $270,000, right? This is, again, the way that they give with one hand and take from the other. So you'd see that in there. And yet you'd also see an increase in other state aid. So the total here, without full federal aid, you would see a reduction of $122,000 over last year, but you could see an increase of $87,000 over this. It's actually over this year to next year, depending on that federal aid. Right, so there's a lot of things, even in the executive run, that is dependent on what happens. And as you know, just driving over here tonight, the main story was what's happening with the next federal package, and some of that, if it were to go to states, would probably be reflected in the next budget run. So, we actually, the good news is we have hard numbers to build a budget on, and yet the cautionary news is we know it could change, and so a lot of that's going to be a wait and see. I know Dana's already got a plan for utilizing that as we go through the budget process, but that's where we are. Since the last meeting, we have an executive proposal, we have numbers for the district, and we'll share those with you next week. So any questions on that before I go into school news? Okay, well, in school news, last week was a very important week at the elementary school. The students participated in the Great Kindness Challenge. And that's when students are asked to perform as many good deeds as they can. So students and all of us are reminded to be kind to each other every day, and not just during Kindness Week. So Kindness Week last week at the elementary school. Looking ahead to next week we have a half day at the end of the week. So Friday, February 12th, we have a half day. That's for staff development. So what we're planning are opportunities for teachers and other staff members to work together in what we call vertical teams. So vertical teams means across grade levels on specific subject area curriculum: art, English, math. Right, so we'll have teams including teachers from younger grades and older grades working together to talk about the connection in the standards and in the concepts that go into the curriculum there. So that's next Friday's half day. Students would be released early, and then staff would remain for that. And then students and staff have a 3 days off that following week, because we have President's Day on Monday, and then we have 2 additional school days that are closed. So it becomes really a 5-day weekend, I guess, something like that, or maybe a 2-day week after that. And then Friday the 19th, which is that one of those 2 days that were open, Friday the 19th, the middle and high school is planning a shortened and somewhat virtual winter carnival celebration. And so this includes real activities, or I guess hands-on activities, as well as virtual activities. The idea being that COVID prevents us from having the kind of interactions that we normally would. And it also helps in a backup plan should we, let's hope not, should we have to close the schools the way we've done a few times up to that point. But so that's being arranged, but there's a theme, and there's all kinds of planning going on right now. The theme is Blast from the Past, and each high school class is going to be representing a decade. So that means that the freshmen will be representing the 1990s, the sophomores, the 1980s, the juniors, the 1970s, and the seniors get the 1960s. So I know all of those decades are way so long ago that none of us here can remember them, but the kids are going to remind us what those decades were like. So looking forward to that. And big thank you to the Winter Carnival Committee that's been working very hard to try and figure out how we maintain the traditions of Winter Carnival in the midst of the restrictions and the limitations that we're faced with right now. So That's everything I have. Any questions or comments for me? Thanks.
Thank you. If there's no questions, we'll move on to information for the board. There are two items, the substitute pay proposal and the 2021, 2022 calendar. Anything you'd like to give on that, or there's for information?
The substitute pay proposal is an annual thing where we've been trying to not just maintain and make sure that we are our salaries are growing with every year, but we're also trying to reach really a minimum salary in a lot of cases, right? So what we discovered a number of years ago was that our substitute teaching assistants, or substitute teachers were earning a wage that was far lower than you would expect. So actually, in some cases, we're still building towards, we're right at now at about $15 an hour for some of these positions. And the reason, in addition to that, we think it's the right thing to do, is it also maintains for us a substitute teacher core. And right now is one of those times where we're really happy to have a core group of people who are coming in to substitute teach. They do a great job. They provide a great service for us as well as for the kids. We desperately need good people to substitute. And so we're trying to keep our salaries at a standard that will keep people working for us, do the right thing. And a little competition with our area schools. We think that people want to work for us. So that's what that is. As far as the calendar is similar to what you saw last time, but there was a change in the rating day. What that means is the final day of school, the State Department considers that the rating would be rating for Regents exams. They had that on a Thursday, which threw a lot of things off. They listened to the school districts in the state, and they moved it back to Friday. So we made that change. We made some other minor changes, and we think that this is going to be the final calendar, unless somebody has some significant questions or concerns about it.
So Roger, I have a question. So if at some point it's not
Any
going to,
questions, comments? Colleen? Let me turn your, okay, go ahead.
I think I'm on. Roger, at some point, if we do, if it does pass federal minimum wage to $15, which it's not going to happen overnight, but in order to keep the differential between where we're at now and even our state minimum wage, where you've kept that buffer and you're around $15 now, if it does go to 15, I would think that subsequently, then we're going to bump up to maybe 17 an hour for our subs, just to keep that break in between.
Yeah, I think that's a really good strategy. And I think that this process, what we've got right now is we have an annual, so Karen has this in our agenda every year, right at this time of the year, right? And I think that it allows us that kind of consideration on a yearly basis. Before we started doing this, substitute pay was set once, and nobody thought about it again until people voiced great concern. And so what we did is we made a change, and we made it an annual update. And so what you're talking about, I think, would be a great a great consideration for probably next year at this time, I would think. And if not in a big way, continuing the process of sort of the small increases that we're making, that'll get us where we want to go. Yeah.
Thanks, Roger.
Any other questions? Moving on, linking goals with agenda items. The special ed would be students first and foremost. That's the only one that I have. If anybody has any others.
I think the Kindness Week at the elementary school and the Winter Carnival activities would be first and foremost.
And just students first and foremost. Sure. Anyone else? If not, we'll move on to the discussion section. We have one item under the discussion item, and that is the high-risk sports. There's, as you saw when you looked through board docs, Roger provided a vast amount of information and all good information on this topic. And I'm sure you've been reading in the press what's going on. Also, hope you took the opportunity to look at all the information, and also getting other people's opinions on regarding the return to high-risk sports being introduced into our district. How I'd like to do this is I'll begin the conversation. I've got just a summary of what I've been, I guess, discussions that I've been having with people and sprinkled in a little bit of my own opinions. And then we'll go around how I have you on the screen here. I'll just go around and call on you, and if you can just give your input. If you do have questions, if you could hold those, and we'll get to those at the end. And then we'll move forward from then if we do have a if we have a consensus or not. So I sent everyone an email. Hopefully you had an opportunity to read that. And again, it's old news that the governor passed this. He approved this reintroduction of moderate and high risk sports back into the district. He then passed that on to the counties, and the counties in turn pass that on to the individual districts. So the buck stops here, so to speak. I hope you all read and digested the 7-page document from the county and the list of requirements for the return of these sports. In our case, we're dealing with hockey and basketball, as we do not have wrestling. But so allow me to begin. As stated in the email, each of us represents the district and not ourselves. So hopefully in soliciting opinions regarding this topic, you got some clarity as to what your constituents are looking for in this. And hockey and basketball are unique in their abilities to protect. Obviously, hockey has equipment, basketball does not. So each offers uniqueness to their exposure. Many of those who I spoke with questioned, in fact, the majority questioned if this is in fact the time to reintroduce another element into our COVID fragile environment. This introduction is, I ask, is it fair to our administrators, teachers, staff who are working diligently to keep our students live in the classroom? While I'm a strong advocate, proponent for sports, having participated in sports, I think it leads to a well-rounded educational experience. I'm also an advocate for the arts, drama, music, and other extracurricular activities which still are not allowed in our schools. Also, if you look into this, there's so many obstacles to overcome, including weekly testing, travel, introduction of new cohorts. Are there teams to play even, and transportation, and the list goes on. Lastly, I can't leave out the irony of one requirement that's in that document. And it's a requirement that says how we plan to prevent unnecessary physical contact among individuals, such as handshaking and high-fiving. This, when we're introducing collision and high contact sports. At this time, my position, and I believe I'm representing those that I looked at, is that I do not think it's a good idea to introduce the commencement of high-risk activities or sports, winter sports. So with that, let's see, we got Dan Marvin. You want to?
Thank you, Rick. I too, asked our constituents, and I got feelings both ways. Some that wanted it, a lot of them were, they felt bad for the seniors and wanted, the seniors to have their last year. I kind of fit in that category. My son's a senior to play basketball this year. There's 4 or 5 of them that he's been playing with since he was 4 years old. So it would have been really nice to have them play. But when you look at the big picture and we're trying to keep the schools open and to introduce this where there is no protective gear and you are full contact underneath the basket, on a basketball court, I don't think it's the right time to do this. So I know my son is not going to be happy with me, but safety first.
Thank you, Colleen. Go ahead.
Thanks, Rick. I think first and foremost, I think all of us feel the same way, that we have a great deal of empathy for the student athletes in our district, just like any other district. But for many of the reasons, Rick, that you mentioned in your list of kind of the cons, I think we can use, on some level, we can use the local women's hockey team that was here that was supposed to be in a bubble, and look what happened there after only a few days. But one of my concerns is, and maybe I'm the only one that follows this, but I notice in some of the guidelines that we're supposed to be following a 4% positivity rate. And what we do in Essex County with the number of townships is, if you pull North Elba, AKA Lake Placid, out of the county, we've had 35 positive cases in the last 10 days in Lake Placid. It doesn't provide us any longer with how many active cases there are currently right now in Lake Placid. But if we gain 35 positive cases in 10 days, one just simply needs to do a simple computation to understand we've probably got a lot of active cases in town right now. And why we've been able to forge ahead the way we have is amazing. And I hope we're able to do that on the academic level. But I think if you put in the mix athletics into this, where we could be traveling to Franklin or Clinton County, I just think we're opening up a whole new can of worms. And again, I feel horrible for the athletes, especially the seniors, but I just think at this point in the year where we're already into February, that hockey, especially basketball, inside, kids touching the same ball, you're not disinfecting in between handling the ball. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. And for whatever it's worth, I would have to agree with Rick on this and with Roger.
Thank you, Colleen. Daniel.
I reached out to a number of people to get some feedback. And at first, the only people that were saying, let them play, had no kids in the school district. So, I mean, I cast a wide net the first time. So while their opinions are somewhat valid, they don't really have a lot of skin in the game. When I really drilled down onto people who had student athletes, I would say a vast majority were in agreement that with what's the sentiment that's going right now is that it's just not the time. There's not a good way to mitigate the risk, and it jeopardizes our in-person instruction, which at this point I think is what we need to focus on and what needs to be the most important. And again, there was this, it was expressed some sadness about the senior year of several of our teams that have been together for a long time. That was something that someone had said to me at the same time. So while I understand that and that would be rough, I think this time I don't think that it would be appropriate for us to increase our risk factor by reintroducing these sports. So I would vote no.
Thank you, Daniel. Liam.
So I only reached out to a couple voices in the community, and one of the common themes is that we have done such a good job at keeping our schools open, specifically the elementary school, that they just wouldn't want to jeopardize that. There was one person brought up the possibility of intramurals, where we keep it within our school, like a basketball. But then again, it was the issue of going to other schools that seemed also to be a cause for concern, where other schools hadn't done as good a job as we had in being open, specifically Saranac Lake. So I would agree with my colleagues on the board, and I would oppose high-risk sports at this time.
Thank you, Liam. Martha.
I also asked for some opinions, and we are a hockey family, so I thought a lot about hockey. I wonder if it's possible to consider hockey and basketball separately because they have different qualities. And if hockey is considered separately, the Sarah Placid group has been playing since I think October. My son's in that group and my husband coaches. And so they're willing to take that risk. We're willing to take that risk for the benefit to our kids that hockey provides. So if we can separate hockey and basketball, I would propose considering hockey, looking into it more. But I agree that basketball is that ball moving between student to student is too risky. And I echo everyone's sadness at what our students are giving up this year.
Yeah, just for clarity, there does need to be separate resolutions per sport. So there'd be one resolution for basketball, another resolution for hockey, if we are going in that direction. So, Joe.
But Rick, also, excuse me, Rick, just a second, I wanted to follow up with something with Martha. Because our hockey team, we have members from the Saranac Lake Central School District on our hockey team. Wouldn't therefore the Saranac Lake Central School District also have to agree, for example, for hockey, that it's not just on our side, it has to be a combination vote? I would think.
I can just respond to that quickly. We have on our boys team and by the way, John Burdick is available for questions if anybody has specific sports questions. John Burdick, our athletic director. But our boys team has approximately, I don't know, eight boys. And so the whole team is 20, but the rest of those would be Saranac Lake, yes, because it's an SLP team. And the girls is a similar circumstance. We may have fewer girls. I might be wrong there. And I don't know, John, do you have an answer to how many girls we have?
I think the ratio is about the same. I think there's fewer girls on the team in general. So it's probably like a 6 to 10 kind of ratio, Lake Placid and Saranac Lake. Ratio is pretty similar.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
But yes, they're both SLP teams, which means they rely on both schools.
Okay, so I
Joe?
guess I'll start, yeah, can you all hear me? I guess I'll start with that. I called a bunch of places. I called some parents, I called other school areas of people that I knew that lived there and asked what they were thinking, or what they did. But I want to start with, not only do we have kids from Saranac Lake, but it's a whole different county and their numbers are so different. So we have to look at that too, not only just that it's our neighboring town, but it's, you know, they have totally different numbers. And I also question, like, usually the seasons are ending at this time, and not starting. So I wonder this is a question for John, not to be answered now, but when I'm done, or is like, what would this season look like? And, you know, I also feel really bad for the athletes. I had kids that grew up and played sports. I grew up and I played all the sports, and you know, that was a large part, but we are in a pandemic and we have to think on that aspect. So I really don't think it's the right time to introduce sports. And I agree with what you said, Rick, about, you know, there are other parts of school, and our main goal is in-person schooling. And there's the drama and all the other clubs that also can't meet. So that's all.
Thank you, Joan. John, can you hear me, John?
Yes, yes. Sorry about my lack of video. I'm not sure. I tried signing in a couple times and it just isn't cooperating. The prospect of schedules has been discussed many times between the athletic directors, both CVAC and MVAC. MVAC is the basketball schools we play. CVAC is the hockey schools, primarily. Yeah, the question of schedule is a tough one, because in addition to potentially playing basketball and hockey, NISFA has started what they call the Fall 2 season, which is potentially could be scheduled as early as March 1st. For us, that would mean volleyball. So the section has to kind of decide what the schedule would look like, and we're not there yet. There's been proposals from the hockey coaches to do a season. Maybe it's just 4 games, a couple of weeks in March, and it would just be, you know, practices up to then. They've been, and you know, Martha said about them playing hockey. They are, but it's a no contact. Well, it's supposed to be anyway. A no contact, just kind of open skate kind of thing, passing pucks, that kind of stuff. And we've done similar in the gym with some open basketball, which is essentially them just shooting around, having some shooting contests, that kind of stuff, just so they can have a hand on their own ball. You know, if they can do it, but it's, you know, it's pretty minimal. But yeah, as far as schedule goes, there's been 1,000 things presented, and all of them have their own individual issues. Because you also have, for most schools, President's Week, so kids will be gone. You got spring break. For us, it's a couple of weeks, end of March, beginning of April. Yeah, so there's a whole lot of pieces that still have to be figured out from a section level. That probably didn't help much.
John, a question for you. Ice time. I understand that the Florida is closing the rinks the first part of March. Civic Center, Saranac Lake is not opening at all. And Essex County is part of the regulations are no travel, no sports related travel out of the county. Where does that put us for, you know, ice time for the hockey team?
Yeah, so that is an issue. Again, they have had the opportunity to skate pretty regularly. And again, there was talk of doing dry land for part of that. Yeah, ice time certainly would be an issue. And I think the county regulation was highly discouraged, right? Which was their way of not totally shutting the door, I guess. And honestly, the Plattsburgh area schools have a similar issue because Plattsburgh State is not allowing the use of their facility. So schools that were playing there are also looking for alternative ice options. I that is a potential issue, and I have not spoke specifically about that to Coach Clark or Coach Martin, what they were thinking, and I know they probably have thoughts. I just don't know the answer to that yet.
Additional questions?
John, Dan Martin here. Have you heard from any of the other schools on, what they're thinking towards basketball or hockey? I mean, you said you had meetings with MVAC and CVAC.
Yes. So I'll deal with basketball piece first. Many of you are aware that for the soccer season, many of the southern part of the Section 7 schools didn't play soccer, and it's pretty parallel to basketball. There's a few potential that might. We did a kind of a round robin, what do you think at this point, kind of survey last week as a group, and I would say there was 5. I'm not including us in this decision. 5 MVAC schools that feel pretty confident that they're going to try to play basketball, and 8 that were not likely or definitely not playing. Hamilton County actually is not allowing high-risk sports, so we have some schools that are part of Section 7 that are in Hamilton County. For hockey, the conversation we had was pretty early on last week, so the notice that we could even do it was still pretty raw. We haven't had any follow-up meetings, and I haven't seen anything in our group texts or group emails saying that they're definitely in or definitely not. I think most of the CVAC schools were hoping to play. I think there were a couple that were unlikelies, but most of them were really just didn't know yet. And I'm sure we'll meet this week at some point, in probably one of these afternoons this week, in a quick impromptu meeting with the CVAC. MVAC, we're meeting again on Thursday.
John?
Yes.
Our girls team typically plays Section 10 schools, right?
I think our league, there's really only 4 teams. I think that we usually play at most of the schools in the state because there are so few in a normal year. But there's 4 schools that we usually play, Malone being one of the 4. And then I think Plattsburgh and Beekmantown are the other 2 that belong in our 4-team league. Again, we play outside of that normally, but my guess is if Coach Martin was going to try to play, he would just probably try to play a home and away with the ones that we could play. I don't think, obviously, we wouldn't be traveling, and Malone can't play as part of Section 10 at this point. So Plattsburgh, by the way, was one of the schools that felt that they would have a hard time playing high-risk sports. That was their initial thought process, which affects both boys and girls hockey.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
Roger, do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, I've shared with the board my concerns about reopening high-risk winter sports, and it really has to do just with what I think you've all articulated so well. Yes, there are risks to the individual players, and then on top of that, there's risks to the operations of our school and disrupting the middle and high school from I think the outstanding efforts that people have put in. And I'm talking about faculty, I'm talking about sports staff, I'm talking about students. And I know it's been a great source of energy and a great source of pride that we've been able to maintain as much as we've been able to maintain here. So yeah, it worries me to consider restarting winter sports at this time, given the additional risk to the individuals and then also to the school operations.
Any additional questions anybody has? Roger had put it in his discussion or support backup material that we really don't need to vote on this, correct? If we have a consensus, but if anyone would like to vote on this, we certainly can. At this time, I would recommend just tabling the high-risk sports and not moving forward at this time, unless somebody has strong opposition to that.
I'm not signaling opposition per se, but
Oops, sorry, Martha. Hold on just a second. Okay.
I'm not signaling opposition per se. I'm just still thinking about separating out the hockey and the basketball and thinking about the hockey further. I would support saying no to basketball, but I'd like to think about hockey further.
Hey, Rick.
Yes.
I think it's, that we shouldn't vote now because there's so many unknowns. We know all the research that we've done, but like John said, there's just, why pass hockey if we have no teams to play? It's until we get that taken care of, then I think we just need to table it at this point.
When do we actually have to vote on this? When's the deadline? Today?
February 1st was the date that the governor gave.
Right. So February 1st was the earliest date that sports could start. The board, actually I wanted to mention this, so thanks for bringing it up. The board could vote to approve, sports at a later date. As you know, this winter timeframe is pretty tight, but you should also know that there's two other high-risk sports that fall underneath this guidance that probably you'll be revisiting this conversation for, and that's John just mentioned volleyball, also an indoor sport, which could be, and as John just said, it's not decided, a sport that opens up on March 1st. Usually it's a fall sport, but it's in the fall 2 window. The other one is lacrosse, which would be traditionally a spring sport and would continue to be a spring sport. It also falls underneath high-risk sports. So, so the answer to your question, Liam, is there's no deadline for voting on it. Obviously, it's a narrow window. So even though time would run out for the winter sports eventually, and I don't know how long winter sports might go on, they're still looking ahead to at least 2 additional sports to think about.
You mentioned, being able to talk about lacrosse under this high risk. That's also a combined team with Saranac Lake. So that's another conversation that we need to have with Saranac Lake and the other county, because so tabling it for now, I think, is probably the good way to go, and keep having this conversation or pieces of it to see what falls out here.
And tabling it allows continued conversation, whereas if we vote on it, then we voted on it. So I would definitely recommend tabling this for now. We've all verbalized our point of view. I do like, Roger, your statement in here, suggested statement, which I think we'll hold on for now, but it really articulates the real reason why. It's for the safety of our students. So, is there any further discussion on the high-risk sports topic? I sincerely thank you all for your opinions, your constituents' opinions. It's not an easy topic when we discuss, and as was mentioned, with seniors and with a lot of students relying on their sports, it's a very difficult decision to make. So thank you very much to everyone. Any further discussion? Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the capital project update.
So Dana, how are we doing?
Really hasn't much changed
Sorry, got it.
in terms of updates, other than the contractors are very sparse. They come maybe once, maybe twice a week, doing little things here and there in terms of getting through the punch list. But for the most part, they aren't around. I think they come in once a week. I know they had scheduled time for the new system in the auditorium for training. That got postponed because it was supposed to be today. So they're looking to do that to get the people that would be working with the new sound system some training on it so that it can be used properly. Roger said, in the write-up, the PA system is still being tweaked. It seems like it's working at the middle high school, and there were some issues for a while at the elementary school, but it seems to be working. There's still some other things that were unanticipated. Well, they didn't bring them up, the contractor, until after the fact in terms of saying that, oh, by the way, we need to bring in another contractor to connect the phone to the PA system so that you can access the PA system from any phone. And that was really at the heart of the reason for the upgrade, was so that you could have access to the PA system anywhere. And so now we're waiting on that coordination. Seems like there's always like one more thing to do when it comes to these things.
Dana, where are we with the outside lighting on the loading dock here at the high school, middle high school?
Good question. I think I don't think it has been put in. I think Roger mentioned this last meeting. They ordered the wrong size hoods, so I guess they're waiting on the right size to come in before installing them. And then getting Dow Electric back here to put those on. So something as simple, you would think, as simple as putting a hood on a light so that the light is directed down would be a simple fix. And I think we've been talking about it now for a couple months.
Anything else? Thank you. Change orders. I believe I counted 12 of them.
We have a lot of change orders to share with you, but none of them require your approval. The only large ones are you've already approved. Actually, I don't. Were there any large enough to approve? I don't think so. But no, they were all smaller than needed for your approval. They're also. I'm sorry, the $85,000 change order for the auditorium ceiling that you approved a long time ago with a vote of the board. But you know how this works, right? The paperwork all follows weeks and months down the road. So as we get closer to the end, they're finalizing all of these official, formal change orders, and that's why you're getting them now. There is a lot of them, and I don't know if anybody has any questions about any of them.
Just a comment, probably my favorite is GC 39.
Jesus. Oh, that's a
Oh,
zero.
yeah.
Put the money back. Oh, the zero. Yes. Do you have an explanation for that? I'm not so sure I have a good one.
No, when I looked at that change order, it was a memo showing all of the change orders that were connected to Bass Hatfield. And I believe there are 17 more that have to come. I think the number is like 50, I want to say 54, 55 total. And they're all little, like minor. They're not a $85,000 one. They're, 1,000 here, 2,000 there. But yeah, I found that to be funny that they had a change order to have a memo on all the change orders directed to Bass Hatfield.
Particularly the meaningless paperwork description. I like that.
Correct.
Oh,
Sounds like somebody over there's getting paid by
I
the
think
hour.
that was me, Rick.
Oh,
I wrote that.
Oh, that wasn't their explanation.
Sorry, that was highly confidential
Sorry.
background information.
On that
no, we'll go on to the minutes. This is under consent, so we'll move right through the minutes. Personnel, long-term teaching assistant appointment. Upon recommended action, upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve Melanie D'Amico, long-term teaching assistant at the elementary school, replacing Kelsey Painter, beginning on or about February 8th, 2021 through June 25th, 2021. Salary will be at the per diem rate of $150.96, step 4, level 3 of the 2020-2021 school year. Benefits will be prorated for the term specific above. May I have a motion to accept this appointment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Second, Martha. Discussion? If not, please vote. Seven yes, 0 no, the motion passes. Additional action items, we have the special education, which is also consent. And then we go right on to good of the cause. No new emails, thank you. Entering the adjournment phase, you have your meeting dates and locations. Please take special note that the budget work sessions begin at 6 o'clock from now on, followed by the board meeting at 7 for those February 16th, March 16th. Old agenda topics, anyone have anything? Any new agenda topics? If not, we have a proposed executive session subject to board approval for the purposes of discussing a particular individual. May I have a motion to enter executive session, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Second. Thank you, Daniel. All in favor? 7-4-0 against. We are now in executive session. Are we going to enter a room again?
No, I'm in the
Okay.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, Dana.
As we get started, I just want to, oh, I'm sorry.
I know.
You're just leaking secrets today. I mean, just.
Jeez.
It would be- When you hear what I was about to say, it would be very contrary. So,